Oftentimes we have conversations, with our family concerning generational wealth. What if I told you that the most important generational wealth is the kind that you can't spend? Thank you all for coming in to check out Embracing the Fight. I am Erica Lamar, your digital creator and host. And hopefully, you've been with me since January of 2023. And if not, thanks for joining me today. I love to know and see, where you're watching from. So please comment below and let me know. And if this is your first time, Embracing the Fight is about normalizing the conversation surrounding physical and mental health issues and concerns. And I start the conversation off with my journey through thyroid cancer, which is over. Thank you, Lord. I had a PET scan done not too long ago and nothing was found. So I'm grateful for that. But as you all know, once one fight ends, another fight begins, or there may be some other fight that's going on, something that you might want to talk about if you're dealing with grief, if you're dealing with job loss, or you're dealing with, just kids that you don't want to say they're bad when they are, but then you don't want to call them that because then, words have life. Anyway, if you would like to be a guest on Embracing the Fight, I would absolutely love to have you as a guest. Just reach out in the comments, or you can send me a message at operations@diversitydesign.com, or you can find me, reach out to me anywhere on social media at Embracing the Fight. The only difference on Instagram is it's Embracing the Fight _. So now that I've gotten the business of everything out of the way, let's go back to what I was just, alluding to. When people speak about generational wealth, they want to know, how much money was passed on and how much land, was left behind for the kids and the grandkids and the great grands. And people always talk about, the money that say the Rockefellers, left behind and all the wealth, everything that they accumulated. But is that really, wealth? I know it's absolutely wonderful. Don't get me wrong. I would love to have that kind of money. But there are some other things that are of more importance than just the money you leave behind. Because think about it. If you had the mindset that you had today when you were a child, imagine what you could have done with that. Imagine what things you could have invented or created. So if you were to pass down the very essence of why you did what you did to your kids, you'll notice that that generational wealth is going to come, and it's going to come faster because they understood the essence of why you did what you did, and you didn't have to sit there and break everything down word for word like, oh, if you want to invest in real estate, you have to get a real estate license, you have to do this, you have to do that, even though you don't have to get a real estate license to invest in real estate. You need to have money and you need to, find property. I'm just saying hypothetically, you don't want to teach the child necessarily the ins and outs of everything, but you want them to understand why you did what you did. So let's talk about it. Let's back up first. Let's go and talk about your family health history. That is generational wealth that you absolutely should pass on, and it's something you can't spend. Think about it like this. I know that several people in my family have had cancer, and some survived, some didn't survive. And I know there are several that have had high blood pressure, they've had strokes, they've had all these different things. I've had a genealogic study, basically done on my blood to see what type of genetic disorders I may have because of the issues I was having with the thyroid cancer and all the things they found out prior to me having the surgery. Now I have a roadmap that I can pass on, to my nieces and nephews, because of course, I don't have any kids. But say if I do have a kid at 50, that's a couple of years from now. But say I do have one, then that child will have a roadmap of what my health history is like. And they can look at how they eat, how they exercise, how they move, and all the things they do, it can truly impact and it can truly impact the way that they, have their quality of life. So family health history, that's the first thing that you want to pass on to your children or to your nieces and to your nephews, because that is what tells them what's in their genetic makeup. And it gives them a leg up on what, not necessarily what they could potentially look for, but what they could potentially fight against so they don't have to deal with it because you've already given them the roadmap. All right. So the next thing, and I always find this to be funny. You think about back in the day, you always had these family reunions and you'd see this cousin or something. You're like, hey, they nice looking or whatever. And it's like, oh no, that's your cousin. Or it could be someone you saw at the mall that you think is attractive. But then you start asking the right questions and you find out that's your third cousin's youngest child. It's like, oh, you know, that's off limits because that's family. So one of the things that is generational wealth is who's who in your family. You need to know your family so you don't end up, accidentally dating your family or, potentially being in a situation where, say, you could build something with a family member and you choose, someone else and it could have been something that could have changed the trajectory of your family. It's always good to know who's in your family and who you can go to, concerning certain things. Now, of course, there's nepotism, and we don't want to do that. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, if you decide you want to, say, build a big business or something, and you find out you have a cousin that's a lawyer, would you use that cousin that's a lawyer, or would you rather pay someone you don't know, give them a whole lot of money? But then, of course, you still have to look at the integrity, of the lawyer and whether or not they won cases or whether or not they've given good advice. There's a lot of different things you have to weigh, but sometimes people tend to, lean towards their family because they know of the goodness that they have within their family. All right. So another thing that you must think about passing on is your cultural values and traditions. So, you always hear, oh, grandmama used to sing this song at Thanksgiving, or granddaddy used to make the sweet tea at the family reunion, or, you know, um, auntie was a woodworker and she knew how to make all these different things. She could whittle all these different crafts, and she did it every holiday. She would make all the little ornaments that's on the tree, and she would carve the year that she made them. And say that auntie was somebody back in the late 1800s. And you got all these little ornaments. You're like, what the heck is this? And you decide one day, oh, let me just get rid of them, throw them in the fireplace and burn them. But you've burned, some major history. So it's important that I know you shouldn't hoard. You shouldn't just keep, random things. But what I'm saying is when things have a meaning or they have a value, you should pass that meaning and value on so the next generation understands what it is. Now, what they decide to do with it, of course, is totally up to them. But I'm saying those things need to be discussed. They need to be spoken, and it needs to be something that is shared. Like, say, for instance, if every New Year the family decides to meet at the big oak tree, on the family land, just for prayer and just to thank God for bringing everybody to another year, and you notice that goodness has followed your family, and all of a sudden you skip a year and then you start seeing some crazy things happening in your family. No, it's not because you're superstitious. It's because the more that we tend to back God out of our lives, the more he stands and waits for us to come back. So all the things that you start to see happening are happening because you are backing away or pulling your family and the love that you have him away. He wants you to meet him, so he can come to you. All right. So another thing is emotional intelligence and coping skills. Imagine if you were able to sit, in history when, say, let's just say the women's suffrage movement, when women didn't have a voice at all. And she was grandma, mom, sister, auntie, they still were cooking and cleaning and, making the clothes nice for their husbands, for their fathers, for brothers, whoever. In some capacity, the woman was doing all the domestic type things. Even though she might have dreamed of being a lawyer, or she might have dreamed of being a doctor, or she wanted to write a book, it was like, no, you're not even looked at as a person. You're looked at simply as a servant, as a means to an end. Imagine the level of emotional intelligence that a woman had to possess during that time. And imagine if that woman had passed it on to her daughter, to the next, to the next, to the next, that you don't always have to live this way. You can eventually fight and break through to where we are now. Once you get there, you still have to realize that you can't cut up and act a fool and yell and act crazy just because you know what you're talking about and nobody's listening to you because you're a woman. Imagine if that had been passed on. Also, with coping skills, emotional intelligence, coping skills, those things go hand in hand. Imagine if someone were to give you the handbook, the playbook from all the things that they went through, in their life. That is generational health because sometimes you just observe somebody going through something and you sit there and you go, you're gonna take that. How in the world do you stand there? How do you let your husband talk to you like that? How do you let your wife talk to you like that? Why do your children act that way? I mean, you're asking all of these questions, but the person is coping with it. And you might not see what goes on at their home. But it's like they're putting up a shield to make sure that nobody can infiltrate their family because they don't put their business in the streets. They learn to, just kind of cope with it and take it home. Now, I'm not talking about people who are dealing with domestic violence or anything crazy like that. I mean, shout that to the rooftops, tell who did it, point them out, call the police, period. But I'm saying, other things that are going on in your family, say, your husband and went and or your wife, they went and bought something extremely expensive and, you struggling to pay bills, but say the thing that they bought is something they believe that can help, you know, make you some money. You're not going to call this man or this woman out in front of people just to make them look bad or seem bad because they made a bad financial decision. You think, because then what happens when whatever it is they chose makes you a lot of money? Then do you go back to those same people and say, oh, look, I was wrong? No, you're not going to do that. You just gonna stand there and smile and look cute next to them because you believed in them, because you learned to not do that, right? So that's something you could pass on, to your kids. All right. Something else, stories, lessons learned, wisdom. A lot of things that, I hear, like when we get a cold and people say, grandma used to rub Vicks vapor on, and that's the grandmas like in my age. But if you go back a little bit further, those grandmas had quinine and that, what is it, 3 6s. That stuff was disgusting. And I was like, how do y'all even do that? And then my mom talked about, lemon and all these other, well, lemon's not bad, but I mean all these other berries and different stuff that they used to do. And then if they had, I think, bruises, they would sometimes put mud on them. Like, we were watching a Western the other day, and I think this guy got shot or he broke something, something happened. And he needed to see a doctor, but he was in the middle of nowhere. And my mom was like, oh, all you gotta do is put a little, mud on it, and that'll help, slow down the issue that he had. I'm saying, going mud. Why would the man want to put mud on? But then I thought about it. That was the Western time. Those were things that they did, to take care of themselves. They didn't have like hospitals and modern medicine. They used what they had in the earth. Imagine if our elders had passed all those stories on to us and we realized, how cloves, how it grows in nature, and if we were to make a clove tea, what it can do, to help with inflammation, what it can do to help, with antibacterial properties and things in our body. What can it do, to help us? Imagine if those stories had been told and we continue to do those things, then we wouldn't rely on medicine the way that we do. We would let food be our medicine, right? Because anytime you guys see, go out there in the yard, get something chew on, you feel better. It might not be instant, like say acetaminophen or ibuprofen, right when you take it. But the mint leaves, when you chew those, it gives you, a calming feeling. It freshens your breath. It opens, your sinuses. So just imagine if you were to do something like that every day. And imagine if someone had told you about all the herbs that are in the earth that can help you. That is a generational wealth that you cannot spend. It can be passed on, but it cannot be spent. And just think about how effective and how good it would be if we had passed those things on. And then you think about the wisdom. Now that's the one, because I had an aunt, and she would listen, to whatever I had going on. Like I was in college and I was telling her about, a problem I had with a person, and she was just basically like, honey, that is not your friend. She said, that's just someone you know. So because people who are your friend are a reflection of who you are. And she was like, does she reflect you? And I was like, no, ma'am. So at that point, it was like, I need to really start paying attention to that, because I was at first, just trying to be around people that like the same kind of stuff I liked. But then once I prayed and asked God for a specific type of friend, He gave me some of the best friends that I still have today. And I am grateful and thankful for that. All from the wisdom of the words of an aunt that I had. And her name is Corey Moore. Love her to this day. She's been gone for many years, but I still think about her and the things that she said. So just imagine the words that you could say to some child now in your family, and years from now, they could be going through something and they remember your words and it helps them get through to the other side. Another thing that is considered generational wealth that cannot be spent: faith, purpose, and resilience. So you have a lot of people in the world that will tell you they don't believe in God, and or they believe in a higher power and they're not sure about what it is, that they want to do when it comes to that sort of thing. Well, I believe in God. I trust God with every fiber of my being. And even when things, don't go my way, I don't ever sit there and say, "Ah, it's God's fault." No, I don't do that. Because think about it. He gives us free will. We make choices. And, you know, you have to accept what God allows. Like I said, choices have consequences. Choices can have rewards. So either way, if you put your faith and trust in God, you'll see so many good things happen in your life. Let's think about this. I remember when I was in elementary school, how we would, say the pledge of allegiance to the flag and all that. And we would always say one nation under God, indivisible. That under God was good for me. They allowed us to pray in school. We didn't have all these school shootings. We didn't have kids come to school with knives and guns and stuff, trying to attack each other. Sure, there were some fights, on the playground and at the school, but nobody was getting, shot or killed until I got to high school. I recall I had to be a sophomore in high school. I was either a freshman or sophomore. I have to go back and look at the dates. I'm not 100% sure. But we were at the rival basketball game of the century, I guess. Jones County High School was playing Northeast High School. And we never really played each other, and nobody could like understand why. But after this, I don't recall us playing them again. However, there was a bit of an argument, I guess, that happened. And we saw some people that were, leaving. So we were like, hey, it doesn't sound like this is going to be a friendly, just little fight. We need to get up out of here. So me, my brother, and my sister, we left. But as we were leaving, we heard something that sounded like firecrackers. So we look at each other like, what's going on? So my sister takes off running. Because at this point, we hear somebody say, somebody's shooting. So me and my brother run, and we're like ducking in between the cars and stuff. My sister then dived on the back seat. I don't know if it's the back seat or like the floorboard of a van or something like. She was like down trying to get out the way. But anyway, she ended up in the car with us. And as we were leaving, we could see like a fire truck coming, and we could see a person laying face down in a ditch. And from that point, all I could say in my head was, Lord, I pray that this person's okay. Well, he didn't make it. He was shot in the back, and apparently it, came out of his throat or out of his neck. I'm not 100% sure, but I remember that was like the worst day ever, the worst feeling. But during that time, that's when they really started talking about taking prayer out of the schools. And it was like people were fighting to take prayer out of schools. Like, no, we need God, we need him to pray. Even though God is everywhere, you have to accept him of your own free will. So that's something that you can give, to your children. The choice to accept him of your own free will. The faith, the resilience to stand up and say that I do love God. I trust God. Now, he don't want you to be a fool about it. If somebody's walking down, saying, I'm blowing everybody's head off who believes in God, like, I believe he'll forgive you if you say in your mind and in your prayer, like, Lord, I believe in you without a shadow of a doubt. And I know there's so much more work that I have to do here on this earth that I'm not going to say, that now you're going to have all these people out here that's like Bible thumpers and everything saying, oh, you're going to deny God in the face of, trouble. And he's supposed to do all these different things to protect you. And you didn't even trust him enough to do that. What if it was you? Would you test that theory? It's so much easier to be outside of the picture looking at the picture than being in the frame. Because when you're in the frame, you have to do, what God tells you to do. If you remain silent, that person might have just wanted to kill you anyway. So imagine if you're standing there and you don't say anything at all and they kill you. Or say you say, yeah, I believe in God and they kill you. Or say, no, I don't believe God and they kill you. It's like it's a no-win situation. So what do? You just have your heart right with God. Trust him, believe him. And that's what you need to pass on to your kids. Don't have them living in fear of being able to speak, their mind and their heart when it comes to God. Or don't have them, confused. That is something that you can pass on to your children. That is generational wealth that cannot be spent. So, of all the things that I just talked about, think about generational wealth as a gift that keeps on giving, not the money. Because, sure, yeah, money is great. But if you don't have the foundation, you won't have the money for long. That money will go away, or it will cause problems that you wouldn't normally have if the foundation isn't laid. Think about it. If you tell your children, yes, we have millions of dollars, and no, you never have to work again, those kids are going to take that literally and they're going to spend, 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 spend. And then when the next generation comes, will they have anything? Probably not, because the generation prior didn't say, okay, well, you know what? There are people coming behind me. Let me invest. Let me be the same way that my parents were. But you have to have that conversation. When you have that conversation and you speak into it, it's not about greed. Because the Bible tells you that you should lay up money or wealth for generations to come, for your children's children. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you're just giving them money, but you're giving them the means, the mindset, the essence of how you did what you did. So, what is something that you can pass on from this generation to the next that will help the next generation be better than you were? That's what I want you all to really think about, because money comes and goes, but what you know of here, nobody can take it away. All right. Thank y'all so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to watch this episode of Embracing the Fight, Generational Wealth That You Cannot Spend. Thank you. And as always, I want you all to have an absolutely amazing day.